From the roughly 20 hours of adventuring in Baldur's Gate 3 at its early access launch, I can already tell you this is probably the closest a story-focused RPG of this kind has come to emulating the experience of tabletop Dungeons & Dragons. The systems here allow me to do exactly the kind of clever but ridiculous things I would ask a human dungeon master if I can do, rather than the simple no you would get from most RPGs when you ask if you can skip an entire quest by climbing around the backside of a mountain and sneaking into the bad guy's lair. Baldur's Gate 3 will tell you to roll for it. It's an impressive start, but it's definitely a very early access game. There are just enough frustrating bugs that a lot of people are going to be better off waiting until it's finished before jumping in. The flexible interactions between character abilities and the world allow each class the chance to shine in ways they normally wouldn't. My Elven Wizard always had a spell prepared that triples a target's jump distance. While this would be very situational in most games, not really worth spending a spell slot on, in BG3 it can allow you to reach hidden treasure, gain a vantage point to rain down destruction with advantage, or even bypass obstacles entirely by taking to the rooftops. I ended up having to remind myself to take at least a few combat spells because I was so excited about all of the interesting ways I could use the utility ones in combination. I like to play my wizards on the tabletop as sort of a mystical Swiss Army knife, not the glass artillery pieces they are in most digital RPGs, and I'm thrilled to be able to do that here. Larian treats level design and environmental interactions as part of how you win battles and solve puzzles, and it works brilliantly in their envisioning of Faerun. The turn-based combat is also well done though. It feels faithful to the 5th edition D&D rules, but also knows when to deviate to avoid being slavishly accurate to a fault. Many of the classic D&D based games, including the first 2 Baldur's Gates, did themselves a disservice trying to force the square peg of real-time fights into the round hole that is the D20 system. Combat in tabletop D&D has always been turn-based, and this is how it should be. Initiative rolls to determine who goes first really matter. It's much more comfortable to take stock of the situation and marshal your resources while contemplating how to control the environment. Sure, real-time combat can work, especially in games where you're mainly controlling one character, but in this type of game works so much better and feels so much more faithful to its tabletop inspiration with turns. Baldur's Gate 3 has also done an amazing job of grabbing my attention from the very beginning. One issue I had with Larian's Divinity Original Sin games, particularly the first one, is that they start out very slow and meandering before picking up steam. This adventure, on the other hand, is compelling from the very first minute, and is so rich with exciting characters, locations, and plot developments along the way that I never got bored. The cast is memorable and complex, with excellent voice acting and dialogue writing even for minor players.
Don't you hear it? It's so peaceful.
On the other hand, I was fairly disappointed that there are currently only 6 classes available in Baldur's Gate 3's early access version, and they're somewhat understandably the most basic ones: Fighter, Wizard, Cleric, Rogue, Ranger, and Warlock. My favorite base D&D classes, Barbarian, Druid, Sorcerer, and Paladin, are nowhere to be found. I imagine more will be added as we get closer to the full release, but for the moment the options are fairly limited. To make up for this though, the list of playable races is fairly extensive. 3 different kinds of tiefling? Half drow? Larian has gone above and beyond the obvious here, especially since NPCs out in the world will absolutely react to your character's background. All of that being said, Baldur's Gate 3 is technically a bit of a mess at times. There are plenty of bugs ranging from hilarious AI glitches to frustrating progression blockers that make entire quests impossible to finish. Without spoiling a major story beat, at one point I killed a major character who was annoying me, and their followers standing just outside the door never seemed to react to that fact. Right now it's in playable but fairly rough shape. The technical issues are understandable for early access, but if you want a polished and pain-free experience, I have to recommend waiting for the full release. There is enough here worth being really excited about that I feel Baldur's Gate 3 deserves to be enjoyed with fresh eyes when it's done, or at least much further along. You'll find numerous moments of genuine storytelling greatness, an exciting and effective turn-based combat system, and freedom to use the abilities of the various classes in outside-the-box ways. I really had fun with what's here, but if I had it to do over again, I probably would have waited. For more dungeon crawling, check out our reviews of Spelunky 2 and Hades. And for everything else, keep it right here on IGN.